Good afternoon, even at this stage, to some of you. I know we've registrations from predominantly Ireland, but we've some from different countries throughout the world. So it's great to welcome everybody here today. My name's David Connolly. Jen, say hello. Most importantly, Dee, big wave. We'll give a proper introduction to Dee in a few seconds. But you're very welcome today. So this is our September event for Startup Grind Dublin. This chapter is one of 600 located throughout the world. It's meant to be a fun kind of collaboration and enjoyable environment for sharing stories of entrepreneurs and entrepreneurial success. I think the strapline is that it's startup events that are aimed at teaching, inspiring, and connecting prospective or successful entrepreneurs, and that's very much what we're going to do here today. A lot of that is made possible through the support of our sponsors. And before we kind of kick off into the fun and festivities of the next hour, I'm going to get Jen to play a video from our sponsors, AWS.
Okay. There's a reason why for the last 13 years, startups overwhelmingly prefer to build on top of AWS. We have the largest number of services, making it easy for you to take on some of the biggest challenges with the smallest teams. We also have partnerships with the top VCs, accelerators, and incubators around the world, making it easier to secure your next round of funding.
I'm a solution architect with the AWS Head Start program. What we do is we work with startups in the education sector, and we help them build their services on AWS.
So we power Tech's AWS's Diversity and Inclusion Outreach program. The program is really twofold. One is to increase the number of underrepresented technologists within the industry, and the second is to provide a platform for them to be seen and heard.
If you're wondering how the AWS evangelism team might be able to help your startup, there are many ways. We're technically credible across our entire catalog of products, so we can help you figure out which services might be able to meaningfully impact your business. We also want to help tell your story. So if you're building something cool, we want to know about it and help spread that message to the world. You might end up on stage at an event like AWS Summit. If you're a startup, you should also definitely check out the AWS Lofts. These are event spaces that are free to anyone with an AWS account. You can treat them like co-working spaces, but the awesome thing about them is that we also have people like technical evangelists like myself, solutions architects that come and give hands-on technical workshops and sessions to help you learn how to more effectively utilize the AWS products and platforms that you're already building on top of.
We are a dedicated team of people that love startups, that we just want to come and help you with whatever we can, whether it be technical or business focused. We are here to help guide you and make sure that you do have a say in what's going on. We do get your feedback. We do bring that feedback to the service teams. That is what we're here for.
All right, so AWS are our global sponsors. A word from our local sponsors, which is sponsoring the Dublin chapter exclusively, is the Local Enterprise Office Dublin City. So they're a government-supported agency that provides grants and funding and supports the small and medium-sized SMEs. And we will be sharing information about them at a later point. But without further ado, I'm to my right-hand side, I think to the left-hand side of a lot of you guys that are on screen remotely, is Dee Coakley. Hello, how are you? How are things?
Good, not too bad at all. It's a sunny day in Dublin. So yeah, feeling good. Thanks for having me.
Dee, before I give an introduction to you, I have a little confession to make. I was chatting to somebody trying to advertise our event and promote it. And he said, I'll absolutely attend based on the fact that you were presenting here today and sees you as, I think the term he used was his North Star in terms of success that you've had.
I'm dying to know who it is.
So, we'll talk off grid, but yeah, absolutely. So look, where do we start with you in terms of currently you're CEO and co-founder of Boundless. Boundless is a B2B SaaS platform that handles multi-country payroll and HR compliance.
That's exactly it. Yeah.
Originally from Roscommon?
I am. Yeah, that's where I grew up.
Up the Rossies?
Still spend plenty of time there.
Roscommon Townie, I believe, as well.
Roscommon Town, yeah.
Lovely, lovely. And I think obviously after growing up in Roscommon, you were chief operations officer of a number of different businesses, all throughout the world. in terms of Simply here in Dublin, Actionista in Dublin and New York, and indeed in London with Masabi as well.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, I was in London for 12 years and came back here about 7 years ago.
Good. And we will get into, and we'll talk a little bit more about kind of the differences through that and pieces that you've taken along the way. And one thing that struck out for me is that piece that all of those companies, and particularly Simply, we've had speakers on previously from Simply here before, and I think actually we met at that in-person event ourselves back in the day. One thing I think, just based on the community and the culture piece, that I'd like to ask you about it initially is how you constantly shaped yourself, or how you felt those roles kind of shaped you along the way.
Good. I mean, very, very much shaped me. I think every role or every job that any of us has leaves a substantial mark on us as we go through life. You know, as do friendships, relationships, where we live, the city we live in, the things that we surround ourselves with leave a big mark on us. For me, I spent about 7 years in the music industry before I started in tech. So I started in tech 14 years ago. So it was a whole new industry for me. And it was an industry I didn't have a network in, didn't have a background in. And the startup scene was really different back then. So there weren't there wasn't the wealth of events that there are now. There weren't all of the online resources that there are. So certainly at Masabi, my learning was done on the job. And I learned a huge amount from the founders of that business. I'm incredibly fond of all of the founding team there. They're a great business. So that left a really big mark on me, because I was changing sector and I was coming to a sector I hadn't known previously. And I suppose I dived right in. I think I knew maybe from the first week. It was very instant when I joined Masabi. Immediately I thought, yeah, this suits me. I love this. This tech space is a good place to be. I'm happy here. But I got brilliant opportunities there. The company was really early stage. It was 5 engineers when I joined. They had never hired a non-engineer. And the company they built a product, but they were pre-revenue and pre-launch really with the product. They'd run some pilots. So it was super early stage. And that was an amazing opportunity to really get stuck in. So that particularly shaped me. And my first COO role was with that company. And the COO role just really suited me. I was definitely my kind of the type of person that I was, and where my interests lay, really suited me. But I fell into it. You know, it wasn't by design. I thought I'd just give tech a bit of a go. I didn't know what a CEO. I actually joined Masabi as a commercial manager. The job was advertised online, and I didn't know what a commercial manager was, and they didn't know what a commercial manager was. I'm not sure I ever figured it out. So I just lent towards ops very early on, and it stuck for about 10 years.
Can I ask, so you said it was accidental. You had been in music for 7 years. Was it that you were looking for a change, or was it just it presented and then you realized your strengths on the upside and followed that? Because that's sort of a common thread in your roles in tech companies to date. The reason I ask, I mean, the angle I'm coming at it from is that the Startup Grind Dublin, the membership, it's a real mixed bag. So you've got people who are in startups, you've got those who, you know, in the different stages of startups, you know, the ideation, or they're actually building something, or they're live, or they're scaling. But then you also have people who are thinking about it. I mean, when you was it you were interested, and it was a different space 13 years ago. Was it that you were curious about it, or what prompted that change to move into it?
So it was the year I turned 30, and you know, anyone that's ever worked in the music industry will tell you that that's like a magic number. The industry hemorrhages people at that age. It's a fun industry when you're younger, but you reach a point where you start to think about your future, and it's a young person's industry. And so I made the decision I wanted to move on. But I did think that I would probably get experience in tech, and then I built up this wealth. I had a network in music. I built up this wealth of knowledge. It seemed crazy to just walk away on that.
Yeah.
So I thought I would work in tech for maybe 2 years, gain some knowledge and experience, and I thought that maybe then I'd found a music tech startup or move back into the music sector with that knowledge and experience. But almost immediately, as soon as I joined tech, I was like, no, there's no going back. So it was taking a leap and a jump. Yeah.
Can I ask on that as well? You mentioned 5 employees or 5 staff members there, all engineering and very much on the development of the software, and you were the first non-technical hire, and indeed then you were a strand separated from that again in terms of you weren't even coming from that technical sphere. How do you think that fresh perspective that you were bringing from your kind of work experience in the music industry helped you in those early stages and has kind of helped you going forward?
I've often said I could see really strong parallels between the sectors. Tech, like music, was an industry that attracted people that were really passionate about what they did. It's not a 9-to-5 job. You know, people weren't turning up to the office, clocking in and clocking out. People weren't doing the role as a means to an end. People had a very genuine interest. And for anyone that's not familiar with Masabi developed train ticketing apps. So we had a lot of train nerds. A lot of people are really into train ticketing. So the people we had on the team were really passionate about the product that we were building. And that passion and energy, that was very, very similar to what I'd experienced in the music industry. Plus, building startups is a creative endeavor. You're starting with a blank piece of paper. There's ideation. You're visualizing where this might go and what it might be. There's experimentation. I often say it is a creative industry in so many ways, and you're working with designers and people who are considering user experience and the design aspects of what you're doing. So there were a lot of parallels in terms of that level of passion, and that's probably what kept me hooked on the tech sector.
I like the hooked analogy, and I like the piece in terms of those creative threads. What I will do when we touch upon creative is I will suggest to people that are tuned in that we can ask questions on the right hand side of your screen. So we'll take some questions through it. We might ask some at the end as well. But please feel free to prop them in. I'll hand over to Jen. Is probably going to. I could see she's jumping and certainly writing to me in private that she has a question that she's dying to ask. So
well, I'm probably in danger of going off on a tangent and asking you questions that I'm curious about myself. But it's funny that you mentioned the creative, the overlap between music and tech, and also your point earlier that that creative music industry is it's a real space for young people who are not as risk averse, who don't have as much that they need to factor in. They don't have mortgages, or they're able to go out and have fun or focus on that side of it. And like with tech, you do see a lot of it's dominated. Maybe you might say differently, but like it is a young person's game. That could be a bit of a controversial statement, but if you look at the statistics for companies getting funding, like a lot of it is people coming out of colleges and universities because they can afford to take, I think, more risks than people who are, longer in industry. On the other side of it, they have a lot of experience. But I think it's interesting that you said the similarity between tech and music, that creative thread, people who are able to take risks or interested in taking risks, I personally feel, just even from observing, that it tends to be more younger people?
Well, the data shows that that successful startups are on average started by people, I can't remember the exact age, but I think it's something like 40, 42, or it's in the 40s. So I think there's a lot of hype around youth in tech, and we see younger startup founders promoted a lot, particularly in the media. But there are plenty of older people starting startups, and statistically are more likely to have success if you do it later. So yeah, I mean, I think there's lots of opportunity for people that are older and decide to give it a go then. You know, I was 41 when I started my first startup. I had worked in startups for 10 years, but as a first-time founder, I was 41. So yeah, I very much encourage people who are further along to make that leap as well. And I certainly know quite a lot of founders who are around that age starting businesses.
I think your point about, you know, what you see in the media can be somewhat misleading, but you do hear a lot of people now coming out of college starting startups versus starting an SME, as in getting involved in the space, but then behind the scenes, those that are actually getting funding or have revenue might be those who have more industry experience. But it is interesting.
Yeah, sometimes I think that we forget, or you know, if you're at startup conferences or reading about startups, you forget that the fundamentals of business still apply to these businesses. It's you know, we consider it a whole new world, but the fundamentals of, can you build something that people actually want, and will they pay you eventually or over time, pay you more than it costs you to make it, that they apply to tech startups, and tech startups are businesses. And yeah, I think there's sometimes there's the hype of tech startups creates a whole lot of noise, and yeah, that's one thing, but there's a whole other part of it that is real opportunity for serious businesses as well.
We could go down a rabbit hole. It could go on for a while, but I'll try and stick relatively to script in the interest of time. Fundraising. So there was an announcement this year, and make sure that I'm saying everything. You had previous seed or pre-seed funding, but this year you had an announcement. Let me pull up the information in front of me that I'm saying the right thing. No, actually, no, I might get you to expand on it. It might be easier than me quoting.
We raised 1.1 million across a couple of different tranches of pre-seed funding. We did that very early on, and then we did 2.5 million euro this year with venture capital funds. So 3.6 million in total raised so far.
It's a lot.
Does it feel like a lot when you're spending it fast? I suppose it depends on the nature of your business and what you're doing. I remember my first experience of fundraising was with that business Masabi we were talking about. I've led fundraising at each of the tech startups I've been with. When I was at Masabi, I remember us planning on raising 1 million and everyone telling us we needed to raise more. And we just couldn't imagine how we could spend more. It was £1 million at that stage, sterling. Couldn't imagine how we'd spend more than £1 million. I think that business has raised 40 million now. We raised about 10 million during my time there. You can spend £1 million very quickly when you're hiring engineering talent.
Yeah.
With Boundless, our costs are not only talent, we're expanding into different countries. So we act as the legal employer for our customers' employees in a whole range of countries. So for each country that we enter, we have to set up entities, work with local lawyers. We spend a lot of money with lawyers, establish bank accounts and employment infrastructure in each of those countries. So we have a setup cost for each country that we enter. So we have operating costs that will probably be beyond what the average startup would be. But yeah, we'll be raising again soon. Yeah, 3.6 million quid can get spent fairly swiftly.
I suppose if you're looking at it for some of the people who are on the call, I mean, and in Ireland, maybe I know that that was over in the UK and it was a few years ago, and you're looking at internationalization from the outset. But for people who are starting off, I mean, that can seem like a crazy amount of money. And just purely in an Irish context, I don't know if you've ever heard the expression that in Ireland, if you ask for $1 million, they think you're mad. And in America, if you ask for $1 million, they also think you're mad, but for very different reasons.
Yeah.
But like for here, people are quite at the seed and pre-seed stages, quite restricted even in what, funding they can get access to, separate to the family, friends. It's a lot of money, even though I know I understand your point.
I mean, I think it's really, really, really important for Irish founders to remember that every Irish founder is operating on an international stage. You could be building a startup out of the UK or out of the US, and particularly out of the US, you might not need to internationalize for a long time. You won't build, now when I'm talking about startups, there are lots of different ways to build a company, and you may choose to bootstrap, and you might choose to build a company where a lifestyle business where you can earn a really good living from the company, and that works really well for you. And that's arguably, maybe that's the most sensible way to build a business. I suppose the businesses that I've been involved in have all been venture-backed startups. There were software companies that required upfront investment, and the plan was to build those businesses to scale. If that's your plan and you're doing it out of Ireland, you are operating on an international stage. So there is no reason why you would restrict your fundraising to Ireland. Like that doesn't make any sense, particularly not in this day and age when you can raise from people via Zoom.
Yeah.
This is one of the smallest countries in the world. Why would you restrict yourself to the pick any other country in the world? They're probably going to have a larger pool of investors than Ireland. There's no reason to restrict yourself to here. And then if you are talking to international investors, you need to be seeing the world as the world at large is, and you need to be talking in numbers that make sense to those investors. And there's no reason any Irish founder shouldn't have global ambitions and shouldn't. We have amazing talent coming out of this country. We are in no way disadvantaged relative. And once you start to travel and you meet founders that have raised hundreds of millions from other countries, you realize there are huge numbers of people here that are just as good. There's no reason that people here can't go and raise. And Irish startups have. We've seen Irish companies raise much bigger rounds in the last 2 years or so. Companies like Times, Learn Upon, Teamwork, there's White Flag. There are lots of Irish companies operating globally, raising from international investors. And then, you do need to speak their language. So yeah, I'd really encourage founders to think that way.
Do you think your time in the UK helped frame your approach to fundraising before you came back here?
Definitely. I've lived in lots of different countries. So I've lived in Germany, Iceland, the US. It makes a huge difference. And I'd really encourage anyone that is younger, early in their career, to get out of Ireland. It's a tiny, tiny, tiny country, and it is a tiny little bubble. And it's not average, it's not normal. It's very hard to have a frame of reference for what average is or what the world's really like if you haven't spent any significant time in other countries. Our team at Boundless are based across 8 countries. I think I'm the only, there are 2 of us that are Irish living in Ireland, 3. But everybody else on the team doesn't, they don't live in the country that they were originally from. Pretty much everyone on the team has lived in many different countries. It brings a really important perspective, definitely, yeah.
I think the expression is you can't be an emperor in your own kingdom as well sometimes. I think that can certainly be a case when it comes to Irish companies and fundraising. And that was definitely something I was going to ask, just in terms of that perspective that you had, that you brought with you. So thanks, Jen, for stealing my question, so to speak. I might just go back a little bit because I just see that there's one question in there from Gavin, and it's around what brought you to, or what was the driving force behind setting up Boundless. You might just talk a little bit about that, and then of course we're definitely going to talk about compliance and where we see that going forward in terms of HR and possibly where employees and staff members are located and what kind of difficulties that presents for companies. But we might just talk about the genesis, so to speak, for Boundless.
Yeah, so the roles, the COO roles that I held, I was always responsible for finance, legal, and HR. Each of those companies, there were small teams. At their biggest, kind of 40 people. So when I say I was responsible for finance, legal, and HR, I was the finance department, I was the legal department, I was the HR department. Sometimes there were people supporting, but I guess I was making the decisions in terms of those functional areas of the business. So I had touched on the problems that Boundless solves. And the last company that I held a COO role with was Actionista, which is a Dublin-based interactive video tech company. And Actionista had an international team, but we were hiring people to be co-located out of Dublin. But people being from lots of different countries, over time, life happens to people and they want to move back to their home country, or they get sick of the Irish weather and they want to leave, which happens quite a bit. And then we wanted to retain those people. They were really great people. They had specialist skills. We had video engineers and data scientists, people with those types of skills. We really wanted to hold on to them. So we were set up in terms of collaboration and building a product that worked really well for us. We had the right tools in place, no major friction points. The friction points came when it came down to the pieces that I took care of, so the operational stuff. So what kind of employment agreement do you put someone on when they're moving to Germany? How do I process payroll for someone that's now living in Spain? What do I do when I have a HR issue with someone who's based in France? How do I harmonize benefits? I have this team. Now all of these people have different employment rights and different entitlements, and I as an employer have different obligations. How do I handle that? And at Actionista, I oversaw the setup of employment compliance and payroll for 8 countries, and it was just an absolute nightmare. It was unbelievably difficult. We were an EU company. For the most part, these people were going to EU countries, so that's as easy as it gets. We didn't have to set up entities in these countries. But for a country like France, it took us about 10 months just to get an employer number. They process payroll there. For Spain, it took about 8 months. And there was a lot of form filling and over and back. And it was just really horrible experience. So I had a really good COO network in London. And I started talking to lots of other COOs I knew. A lot of them were at larger tech companies, well-funded tech companies. They all had this problem and nobody was happy with how they were solving it. So it was really clear to me. I was a reluctant startup founder because I knew, I was under no illusions. I knew how hard tech startups were. Yeah. I knew it was incredibly tough, incredibly long journey. Lots of peaks and troughs, probably more troughs than peaks. And, I knew it wasn't necessarily a ticket to happiness. I knew a lot of very unhappy startup founders. And I knew how, I wasn't completely sure, but I knew enough about the problem to know that it might be impossible to solve it. I didn't know that we were going to be able to build a good solution. But when I talked to people about it, people were biting my hand off. People were saying, you have to do this, you have to do this. And pretty much 100% of the COOs that I spoke to had the problem. They all had budget allocated to solving it, and they were all unhappy. Nobody was saying, oh, well, I'm pretty happy. It wasn't like 80% of people were looking for an alternative and 20% were saying, oh, no, I have this really good solution. It's just those people haven't heard about it. Nobody was happy. Okay. So I was like, yeah, the signs are pretty good here.
Anyone who had, so if you were to look at outliers, was it those that were, it wasn't that much, it wasn't so annoying that they were looking for a different solution, they had systems basically set up to manage it. So they were, anyone that you did talk to, I mean, surely there must have been one or two that had something set up, even though it wasn't.
People had stuff set up and they were miserable with those
Yeah,
solutions.
okay.
So there were, I mean, our company would be described as a PEO. And anyone that's done business in the US may be familiar with that terminology. There are about 500 PEOs in the US. So in the US, if I employ people wherever I'm based or whatever my business is, I could be a pub or a shop, chances are a few of my people live across state lines, state borders. I then have to comply with the employment laws of that state, and I have to do tax filings for them in that state. So it's a massive challenge. It's a massive problem in the US. So small companies in the US all use PEOs. They outsource the admin around employment and payroll to these companies.
Okay.
So I've lost my train of thought. The people who were happy or weren't happy. So yeah, the concept of PEO had been, like, there were companies that were doing it internationally, but everyone I spoke to that was using those companies was like, the experience is just so bad. It's everything's on email and in spreadsheets, and it's like a guy in a shirt and tie just trying to sell, and the pricing was completely opaque, massive menu of additional fees and charges. So companies are paying between $1,200 to $2,000 per employee per month.
Wow.
Of whatever the payroll was.
Wow.
So it really only worked for the very large, very well-funded companies, and they were really only doing it for senior execs. And everyone else was just going, we just break the law. We just have that's what people were doing. They just had contractors, and they were like, we know we're breaking the law. It's a massive problem. For companies that had raised significant funding rounds, it was a problem at due diligence. Boards were stressed about it. For companies that were prepping for exit, they were saying, we're like breaking the law here, left, right, and center, but we just have no good way of solving this problem. Yeah. So yeah, the signs were
you had to go for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it is a thing. I mean, oftentimes people know they have a problem and they hate doing something. I mean, a lot of people on this call will resonate with them. There are those things you have to do, you hate doing them, but then there's that, like, are they enough of a pain point to then break what's currently there and adopt a new system? Like, that's, but for you, the general consensus was that it's so annoying, we need to find a solution. And timing as well, probably with COVID, as I've no doubt ramped things up in that you have all these distributed teams, different time zones, people now looking for work. I mean, in Ireland, you have some skill sets that you have a lot readily available, and then you've others like data scientists or analysts that you have to look abroad because there's just not enough. And with all the bigger companies coming in for any startups, they don't have the option of looking locally. They do have to look internationally. So a lot of things came together. It was just like a no-brainer.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I mean, we founded the company well before COVID, so we couldn't have seen that coming down the tracks. And we thought we were building a solution for the tech sector because we thought this problem mainly affected the tech sector. We knew historically it was kind of oil and gas and non-profits that had these execs or people, engineers going internationally. And we were saying, well, the new breed of company with internationally distributed teams is tech companies. But I think we were probably naive to think that there were a much broader range of companies actually experiencing this problem. But with COVID, that range of companies just exploded.
You do have to start somewhere, though. I mean, so you can change over time. What would you say is your ideal persona? Like, who is your ideal client or customer?
So it's and right now we're selling to a really broad range of sectors. We will probably get more specific about this over the next 12 months or so. But everything right now, everything from financial services, manufacturing, energy and sustainability, a whole host of companies, lots of tech, as you would expect. Generally, they're knowledge workers, generally people with skills that are in high demand. And our ideal customer company is a company with between maybe something like 200 and 1,500 employees overall, with something like maybe about 25% of their team being internationally distributed. And usually it's a case that they'll have, 2 in this country, 3 in that country, 1 in that country, rather than 25 in this country and 44 in that country. It's usually quite a spread.
Okay. And right now, your coverage of countries, different markets, what's the difference between now and what your plan is over the next 12 to 24 months, like going into different markets?
Yeah, so pretty aggressive plans from that perspective. So for us, when we talk about markets, we have to look at markets from 2 angles. One, there are the countries where we support employment, so where we establish all of the infrastructure and we're set up to employ people and pay people. So that's where the talent is. And right now we have 17 countries, but we're adding 1 or 2 countries each month. Hoping to be live for about 70 countries by the end of next year. And then there are our markets in terms of where our customers are based. And most of our customers are based out of the US and the UK, but we have customers in Japan, Belgium, they're all over Australia.
Do the clients guide the direction of what other markets you explore, or how do you even prioritize or make a call on that, given there's somewhat nearly 200 countries, am I right, roughly?
Around that, yeah. So yeah, we are very much guided by customers and where demand is. We have a whole range of factors we have to take into account. Obviously, we're moving to cover as much of Europe as we can as quickly as possible. That makes sense for us to say that we have full European coverage. Then there are the countries where there's lots of talent, but there's particular demand in countries where there is lots of talent and compliance is particularly challenging. So in the countries where employment law is pretty hairy, so countries like France, Italy, Spain, Germany, there's a lot of demand for those countries. Brazil is a country with a lot of complexity. It's really challenging to employ people there. The tax regime is mind-boggling. So there are lots of companies then looking to outsource all of that. So those types of countries are really
fun times for you.
Fun time.
Yeah, but that's where the money is. I mean, if that's the pain for people, they're looking for a solution. Sorry, David, I've controlled the conversation. If you want to interject.
No, absolutely not. I actually have one question in just in the chat function, and with a couple more that we can touch on that people have sent in previously. So just this one, Dee, just bounce it off you. How do you use that creative inspiration? I think that's touching on your kind of previous musical career and background. How do you use that to shake up, disrupt a traditional sector such as train tickets, Musabi, and or HR compliance with Boundless? How do you use that as an inspiration?
It's a really interesting question. And I mean, my honest answer is probably, I don't know. Like, I suppose we talked earlier about how every job you have leaves a mark on you and shapes you. And that's true of every experience you have in your life. And, the art that you're exposed to and the life experiences you're exposed to, they all shape you. It's really hard for any of us when we make decisions in life or we react in certain ways emotionally. It's difficult to put labels in the moment on why it is that you reacted that way or why you made those decisions. I mean, I think anyone would agree, or any research would show that the more you are exposed to inspiration, and I think being exposed to art, all forms of art, music, anything like that, architecture, it can only be helpful in terms of driving your creative thinking and your problem solving. Difficult for me to know. I mean, I wouldn't be a classic visionary. Like I'm maybe a little bit of a rare breed. Like I definitely have creative tendencies and leanings. I have a lot of friends that work in the arts and work in theatre, and I definitely gravitate towards people like that. But I mean, I'm an accountant. I'm not a chartered accountant, but I have finance qualifications, and that is very much my world as well. I love data. I love a good spreadsheet. I'm very grounded. So it's like I have this juxtaposition. Like I say, not a classic visionary, very grounded in reality in the real world. And sometimes I have to pull myself back from that being in the weeds of detail, but definitely a realist. Like, you know, I can visualize things and visualize where they'll be going, but I am also I will face up to reality. So yeah, that's not really an answer to the question, but I think all I can say is
listen, creative question, creative license.
Yeah.
I absolutely no problem with that. I'm sure Amy gives the response there and how she feels on it, so that's totally fine. Just a couple of questions that came in. So Jen had asked over the last couple of days for people that put in a couple of questions that they may have asked, or they may want, they might be shy about asking here, but I've certainly put them forward previously. One that stuck out for me, and I'm just going to quote it verbatim. How did you find stepping out as a number 2, i.e. COO in 3 different positions, to a CEO? And did you build a team around you to help with decision making?
That's a really good question. And all I can say is I probably should have done it years ago. I mean, there was definitely, like, you know, issues with kind of self-belief and imposter syndrome and so on that meant I didn't do it years ago, which arguably means it wasn't the right time for me, and this was the right time for me. It was an inevitability. I described myself as a reluctant founder earlier. I was a reluctant founder, but I reached a stage in my career where I wanted progression. I wanted something new. I wanted to be challenged. I wanted something exciting. And that wasn't going to be another COO role. So where was I to go? And I didn't feel that I was necessarily the right person to be a COO at a bigger company. That wasn't what I was looking for. So CEO was the natural next step, and that quite literally that was where that came from. So I was nervous. I did, you know, I was like, God, can I make this change? Will I enjoy it? Will I be able for it? But I've actually really loved it. I thought I'd have a lot more self-doubt than I do, but I think I emotionally prepared myself for it over many years. And I was really ready. I think my expectation was it was going to be this really dramatic jump, and it might be really challenging, and that I might fail and I might find it very, very difficult. I think because I maybe catastrophized about it a little bit in advance, it actually hasn't been that bad at all. It's maybe that made the landing softer than it might have been. But it's been a great transition, and I have and continue, and I'm so early. Boundless is such an early stage business. I'm so early on my journey. I have so much to discover and so much development that I need to do as a CEO, and that's pretty cool to feel that I'm at a new stage of my career, and I have so much scope for development. That's exciting.
Cool.
About the team, definitely. I've definitely in my COO roles, I had never really hired very senior people onto my ops teams, and obviously with Boundless, our business, a lot of our product, the tech is at the forefront, and that's the customer interaction is with the tech platform, and that's where their user experience is. But at the background, we have lots of ops stuff going on. So we have senior, very experienced payroll people, HR people, legal people, and it's been really awesome to be able to hire real experts in those areas that I had touched on, but I'm not an expert in, to be able to hire people who know far, far more than me, and to be able to learn from them every day of the week. That's been super cool. So yeah, I think for any CEO, you have to build a team of people around you who are really strong and great decision makers. But that's been particularly important with this business.
Can I ask? Sorry. Go on, David.
Yeah, I was just going to ask. Actually, do you find yourself been or gravitating towards the areas that you previously looked after? And you've kind of answered that in a way, in terms of, like, you mentioned that you were those ops pieces, that you were very much in charge of the finance and all of those areas in previous roles. Do you see yourself, or have you had to catch yourself and go, I can't just focus on that and I need to look at other areas, or is that something you've encountered?
So Boundless is really complex business. It's a long way off a widget, you know. There's quite a lot to it. So I haven't had the luxury of being able to focus on any one particular area. I am pulled in lots of different directions all the time. I mean, definitely I focused more in the earlier stages on the country setup stuff and our operating model and stuff like that, which was more closely linked to the stuff that I'd done in the past. And over the past few months, I'm much more focused on sales, which was relatively new for me. And I see that over the next 12 to 18 months, I'll be really focused on sales and growth. But yeah, I you know, there are areas of the business where I inevitably have to spend some time, like our finance function is really complex, but we have a really strong team and we've got a lot more experience than me. So I don't need to get involved in detail. I'd like more time and more capacity to spend more time on strategy, vision, long range planning. But as the team is developing, you know, I am spending more time in those areas, and as we are maturing as a business, we are getting better at proactively factoring in time and spending time. Myself and my co-founder, you know, have a lot of plans between now and the end of the year for different planning sessions, collaboration sessions, working with investors and so on. So that the strategy and vision stuff is somewhere I'm naturally spending more time.
Cool.
On the same topic around teams. So you mentioned that in Wasabi it was the engineers and you, and over the years I'm sure you've seen, because if you're starting and getting involved at an early stage, seeing the teams being built out. Any tips or advice around how to decide what the right roles are and the right people at each stage as you build a company? I mean, and maybe like looking at even Boundless, build that out.
Don't know if you heard there that my dog was scratching at the carpet. Jen knows my dog well.
It's very cute.
Just like to scratch the carpet, so apologies if there's strange sounds. There he goes. So yeah, in terms of, that's actually something I love team planning. I've just always been into it. I've done quite a bit.
You've excelled for it.
I really do. I really do. I have done quite a lot of consulting at various times between jobs to tech startups, usually around fundraising transactions, financial models, planning for growth, that kind of thing. And with most tech companies, most of your cost is around the team. So, you know, if you're defining what it is that you need to raise and how you're going to build a team, how you're going to build a company going forward, the team and the team that you plan for is just such an important part of that. So I've done quite a lot of it over the years. It's like everything in life. The more exposure you get, the more attuned, the more it becomes intuitive to you. Like in the very early stages, when you're new to hiring and team building, it's trial and error, and there's a lot of uncertainty, and you're making stuff up as you go along. And as you get more experience, you're much more quickly able to say that, you know, these are the kinds of people that we will need in this team. They're the kinds we need in that team. And you can very quickly look at CVs and say, absolutely not right, not the right profile. That's the right kind of person. Yeah, it's something I love. And it's something I would really encourage any founders who don't have experience at hiring, spend time with people that do and ask them how they go about it. For me, I actually have kind of developed a framework that I've just been using in the last 7 or 8 months, where I'll consider, and I start with an information dump. I'll just put down a whole load of bullet points of what do I think I need this person to do? Or sometimes it'll be, I don't know if this is a person, I just know this area of the business, there are all these things that need to be done, and I'll just throw down the bullet points. And then I try and group them and go, that's kind of related to that. They're actually saying the same thing, just in different words. And then when I've grouped them, and I tend to do this in a CODA doc, I'll put category labels against the groupings of bullet points. So the bullet points will be, areas of responsibility. And then I'll consider, I'll have a column where I'm like, well, what level of seniority is that? Could that be someone really junior, or is that someone more senior? And then maybe you realize, what I really need here is one junior person and one senior person, or this is all one person, or it helps you start to realize what you need. And then I'll usually go, okay, well, if I was to hire that person at that level right now, what does that mean? What will this team look like in 12 months' time? And I do an org chart. I'll actually sketch out an org chart and go, okay, well, this person is likely to want some career progression in 6 months. So then they'd be there. So then we probably bring in this person, but then that team starts to look sizable. So you need a really senior person who's going to oversee that team. And that's how I make decisions about who to hire when.
Very good. David, I'm mindful of the time. Have you any other questions you want to ask before I ask one more?
Yeah, you mentioned one, and it's based on a previous question, or it's based on a question that came in prior to today. And you mentioned your guilty pleasure about data, and really you love a good spreadsheet, and we all love to admit that from time to time. So the question is just around how do you manage that challenge of analytics around people, which generally don't conform to analytics and can have that uniqueness to them?
Yeah. So do you mean when hiring people and when you're looking at team?
Yeah. I think that's what the question. We'll say it is.
Yeah. So well, I think the framework that I've just outlined is a relatively analytical. What I'll also do as well when I produce this table, I will have how important is this thing? So what's the likely impact of these areas of responsibility, and how urgent are they? So something might be very high impact, but it might actually be low urgency. You might not need it this year, but when you do bring that person in, it's going to be transformative. So the stuff that's high impact and urgent, that floats to the top of the list in terms of what's important. And then the stuff that could be further along is further down the list. And then when you interview people, or when you're looking at CVs, you kind of say, well, this person has this stuff that's really great and it's really useful, but actually that we don't need that this year, that we're going to need that next year or the year after. So this person's an amazing person, but they're not the right person for this role. But that's where I think so many people go wrong with hiring. We had it recently, someone, we brought someone towards quite far along the recruitment process, and the candidates we were seeing coming in were far more expensive than we were expecting them to be at the outset. And we realized we just pitched it at the wrong level. We didn't need the best person in the world at serving this functional area of the business. We needed the best person in the world to operate at this level, not this level. We have someone at this level and they're absolutely amazing. They can run this function. We needed someone to work for them, not someone to be over them. And I think that's where people go really wrong. They think they're looking for the very best person, but you're looking for the most suitable person. And that's where being analytical and applying logic and taking a cold hard look, and also like if you're looking to hire diverse teams and remove bias from your recruitment process as much as possible. Hiring should not be about like chatting with people and hiring the person you like the most, because then you will just end up with a load of people that are from your kind of educational background, your socioeconomic background. It's not about who do you want to go to the pub with on a Friday night. Like, you should like the people that you're hiring. You should feel that they're aligned with your values and the values of the team. But you're not looking for a group of mates. You should be looking for people that have the right skills. And you should be able to look past if someone is, I'm a real extrovert, if someone's a real introvert, or maybe they're not that, their English isn't that great, or you should be able to look beyond those things and see how they will perform in this role. So being analytical is really important, I think, with my.
Cool. Thanks, Dee. Can I ask, we're going to bring it to a close now. Where can people hear more from you and learn more about Boundless?
Yeah, I'm on Twitter. I'm at D Coakley. That's DEECOAKLEY. Our website is boundlesshq.com. Yeah, and you'll find me on LinkedIn as well. I don't think there are too many D Coakleys on there. So yeah, feel free to connect. Love to hear from people. Thanks so much for having me. I'm a long-time fan of Startup Grind, so this is great to do this.
Brilliant. Look, and thanks for coming along. I can now confess that person that mentioned that you were a North Star and someone that was an inspiration for them, I'm very much, having listened to you over the last hour, I'm very much in the same school of thought. So thank you very much for this afternoon and for giving up your time. For those of you that are in attendance, I just want to highlight that our next event will take place next month, 21st of October, where we have co-founders Ian Keogh and Tom Lyons of The Currency. We'll be circulating details of that closer to the event. We'll also be circulating a recording of today's event to our 5,500 strong audience chapter members. So Dee, thank you very much for today. Jen, I'm sure you want to echo those sentiments.
Yeah, I was just going to say that we have a full lineup between now and March next year. So people can check it out at www.startupgrind.com/Dublin. All the details are there. They can register. Dee, that was very enjoyable hearing from you. I still have a load of questions, so I'll have to corner you someday and have you answer them. But we will send out the recording and some details where you can find out more about Boundless to anyone registered and also to all our membership. So just thank you very much, Dee. Really enjoyed that.
Thanks, guys. I really enjoyed it too. Thanks so much. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Dee. Take it easy.
Bye all.
Bye.
Stop recording.